Hi there and welcome back to the After Aston I podcast. I'm Katrina, I'm joined by Geoff, and this is our final episode of season 1. Can you believe that, Geoff?
I really can't. It's absolutely flown by and it's been so much fun.
I know, it's been brilliant. I love chatting to all of our alumni and I feel like I've learnt so much as well.
The same, I have learnt so much, although, as we've established, in my case, the bar was set quite low.
We'll tell you a little bit more about what we've got planned for season 2 a little bit later, but for now, we're thrilled to welcome you to our season finale guest, Rachel Krol.
Rachel has been happily employed by top global company Mondelēz International since she graduated from Aston in 2012 with a mechanical engineering degree. Mondelēz are snack giants. Their brands include Cadbury, Belvita, Milka, Oreo, Philadelphia, Sour Patch Kids, Toblerone, and Ritz crackers. My personal tip, try them dipped in hummus. Chef's kiss. She currently works as a project engineering manager with a team delivering exciting and challenging engineering projects, including the new Cadbury chocolate bar production line and the innovative use of collaborative robots for Bournville Cocoa. Rachel, welcome to the podcast.
Hi there. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Any opportunity to connect back into my old uni, I will take as soon as it comes about. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Rachel, it sounds like you work at one of the coolest places on the planet. Is it like working at Willy Wonka's chocolate factory? Like, what do you do on a typical day?
So yeah, I guess it's kind of like working at Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. Everyone says, oh, you're like Willy Wonka, except for my mum. My mum always called me an Oompa Loompa. And I'm like, thanks, mum. Just demote me straight away. But it's incredibly fun. I've been here now for, tens of years. And it's always such a proud moment when people ask me, oh, what do you do? So I'm an engineer, I work for Cadbury's or Mondelēz. You'd say Mondelēz, less people know that name, but you say Cadbury's and they're like, oh, wow, that's amazing. What do you do? So it's really a massive sense of pride to be able to say that's what I do. It also comes with quite a heavy dose of stress because it is one of the nation's favorite chocolate brands. That kind of responsibility to make sure that we're maintaining the highest quality that we can and that, we're representing the company to the best that we can is always something that plays on your mind. But ultimately, stress aside, every job's got stress. It's extremely fun. And when you do get stressed, you go, oh, it's okay. It's just chocolate. It's just chocolate.
So have you been involved in quite a few areas at Cadbury's World?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So although I will say Cadbury World is the tourist side, Bournville Factory is where I work.
I think that's how we see it. That's
yeah,
why.
Exactly. But yeah, no, I've been lucky enough in my time here to be involved in a lot of different things. So I've predominantly worked in the Cadbury Bournville factory. I've done some little works here and there. I work part-time in our Welsh factory. It's called Chuck. They kind of manage the cocoa beans. So the interesting thing about Cadbury's is that in terms of bean to bar, we pretty much do all of that ourselves. Not necessarily all at Bournville, but we take cocoa beans, we take milk, we take sugar, and we're the ones that combine all those ingredients together and make the amazing chocolate that everyone loves. So yeah, I've been involved with loads of different products. So like Marvelous Creations, most of what we call the tablet bars, which are the larger 100-gram bars. Oh gosh, buttons is one of my most common projects. My most recent projects, I should say. As well as services to the factories as well. So I've been involved with a couple of projects which are not related directly to a product, but are more supporting the site which I work at.
You mentioned stress a second ago. And obviously, I'm part of the 99.999% of the population that chocolate just arrives and we can't imagine that there's anything like pressure attached to it. But I live just around the corner from Bournville. And from the factory. And I've got a couple of friends and neighbours who work there. And they tell me it's inside the business. They're on almost a completely different timeline to everyone else in the outside world because of the importance of chocolate at certain occasions. Now, I think they're on the marketing and logistics side of things. But is that do you have the similar pressures and impacts at certain times of the year where, Christmas has to begin actually X months in advance when most of us aren't thinking about it until December? Inside, you guys are there from the word go.
Yep. So the really fun fact we have is, Creme Eggs, we make Creme Eggs in Bournville. It's the only site that makes Creme Eggs for the UK market. And it only releases, so I know people say, Christmas is just over and the Easter eggs are already out, and that's true. But we release them between, let's say, January until whenever Easter is for the year. But we make them all year round. So we never stop making cream eggs, caramel eggs, and the little mini cream eggs as well. We make them 24/7 all year round, but we only release them in those one dates. And it's something along the lines of, if we have a very good production shift, we can make about 1.2 million cream eggs in a 12-hour period.
Wow.
It's a lot of
Wow.
eggs. So yeah, we just keep... Bourneville is all about big production, and that's what makes it so fun to be an engineer here. So it's all about numbers and pushing out a large amount of volume. Again, making sure the quality is good. We want to make sure people eating our products, are happy and contented. But you mentioned the molding line that I did most recently. We were talking about 520 bars a minute is the speed of that line. And again, it runs 24/7, doesn't stop, except for cleaning.
Rachel, you actually did your placement year while you were at university with Mondelēz and then returned upon graduation. What did you experience during that placement year, and what made you return and back to the same organisation?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So, yeah, I did my placement year here in Bourneville as a process engineer. So essentially, you belong to one of the lines, or two of the lines as it was back then. And it's about improving the process, making it as good as it can be. And I really enjoyed it. And I was lucky enough that my manager at the time allowed me to explore a little bit. So I kind of spent the first 6 months just understanding what I was doing, because it was quite daunting. And then once I kind of got my feet under the table, he let me go explore other bits of the business when I had some time. And I realized just how big the business was. And even back then, I really fell in love with project engineering. So what makes project engineering different is essentially, what I do is we spend what we call capital funds. So funds that come down from the business to put a new process in, make a new product, improve an existing line sometimes if it needs a bit of an uplift because it could be a bit older. And it's kind of a very cyclic project role. So you get different projects, you complete them. And every project is similar but different. So I remember seeing that. And actually, I will say, when I left to go back to university, I didn't actually intend on coming back into the company. It was Kraft Foods back then, but I didn't intend on coming back into the company. Obviously, I was always keeping it in mind because I'd had good feedback from my placement. But I did apply for different roles, and I did get offers from different schemes. But ultimately, what changed my mind to come back to the company was it was a very big name. So I thought, well, as an absolute minimum, I could do my graduate scheme with Kraft Foods as it was back then. And it's a great name to have attached to my CV. Why wouldn't I say no to that? The pay was good for a graduate scheme at the time as well. And it just gave me so much more opportunity in the 3 years that the grad scheme is here to do something outside of engineering and just get as much experience as possible in a fairly short amount of time.
That sounds great. What has made you stay so long?
Also a good question. It's a strange one. It's like, I love the company, first and foremost. I will say I do really like the company. It's a lovely family feel. The department that I work in, like a lot of people in my department, have been here for tens of years. So a lot of us are very long-lived, as it were, in terms of our roles. The company as well, on the softer side, go back to the harder side. So the job that I do is extraordinarily interesting. So although every project is different, they're also similar, but then also different. I've done projects which, the cobots that I'd mentioned before in Chirk. I've done chocolate molding lines, which I'm now classed as an expert for chocolate molding lines. I've done a water pH treatment plant, which was completely different to anything that I'd done before. And every role is different, and it's always just so, so interesting. And then to the softer side, the company has very good support. So we have, like I said, it has that kind of family feel to it. We do lots of charity work, which I love. In terms of me supporting early careers and doing the STEM ambassador stuff that I like to do, I'm fully supported in doing all of that. We have a great on-site occupational health, and it might sound ridiculous to bring that up, but in terms of mental health services, family services, the company is really good for that sort of stuff. And it's important because your job is a big part of your life, but so is your personal life, and they've got to kind of mesh together to give you the best life that you could possibly have.
The ability of companies to offer that kind of almost holistic approach, it seems that it's becoming more and more important, whether that's people maybe post-pandemic looking around and wondering about things, or it's the younger workforce coming through, different generations, different expectations. But it's something that's always been there. That's always been part of it, did you say?
Yeah, essentially. I mean, going back. So when Cadbury's was around, before it became Kraft, before it came Mondelēz, because you can see in the background, I've got all this very heavy heritage stuff. It was a site made by Quakers. So the whole of Bourneville, the small village that exists within Birmingham, it was kind of based around workers' rights. So I guess from that, it's kind of just gone that way in terms of this particular food industry. There's always been that support and that kind of expectation that, yeah, work is a massive part of your life, and it, as stressful as it can be, to make the best workers, you want them to be happy. And as silly as that sounds, as far as the business is concerned, if they've got happy workers, then they'll get more productive workers.
The new chocolate bar production line, or say the most recent one you've been working on, and you mentioned the staggering numbers of 24/7, the numbers going through per minute. From an engineering point of view, and I know nothing about engineering, but from an engineering point of view, I imagine, because they have to be incredibly precise. When we see them on those TV shows or when we go and do tours of factories, we always see, the precision they have to have. But if they're pumping out those kinds of numbers all the time, they've also got to be incredibly robust as well. Did you kind of learn that once you were in the job, or is it based on sound engineering principles anyway that you'd already learned, or is it the kind of thing where once you've got a degree and then you start putting it together with the reality on the floor? How do you get the two combined, and is that part of the fun for you, the challenge of having those two sides?
So it's kind of a bit of everything that you mentioned. So I did a module at university, I believe in my second year, which was about Six Sigma and about failure, because we talk a lot about that in terms of production. So I had done a module on that at university, which I was like, aha, this is something I can apply to my job. And this is when I was a process engineer, so it worked out quite nice. And then shout out to Dave Upton. Don't know if he still works in the engineering department, but he was my placement tutor. He told me that after he'd tutored me in my placement, he actually revised that module to include a chocolate kind of section to it, because we talked about failure, and back then the thing I was looking at as an intern was whole nuts in chocolate bars. And again, it sounds bizarre when you say to people who don't work here, like, I was counting nuts as part of my placement, but it's important. If a customer expects to have a certain amount of whole nuts in a chocolate bar, and legally too, because it's an ingredient that's mentioned on the packaging, then you better have that number of whole nuts in that chocolate bar, or else you're letting down the consumer, and we don't want to do that. So yeah, it was kind of a bit of both. I used what I learned at uni. I specifically remember that module thinking, this is when it starts to come into practice. And then obviously you do it in practice. Things in practice are never like when you learn at university. It's very different. You expect one thing and end up with something very different. But then it kind of is that cyclic nature of learning, of learn the theoretical, endure the practical, and just keep going round and round.
And another fascinating sounding project I mentioned at the beginning in your introduction, collaborative robots for Bourneville Cocoa. I'm sure you get a lot of questions, but we have to know about collaborative robots. Can you tell us about those?
So collaborative robots are really interesting things. They've been around for quite a while, but really I think it was around 2019 where within Mondelēz we kind of kicked off a bit of a new technological project. And essentially a collaborative robot is a robot, robots are dangerous. Basically, those big robots that you see in car automation lines, if you go near them, they do not know you're there. They will just whack into you, send you flying, and potentially fatal. We're talking about big injuries, because this is another massive part of my job. Is safety is always the first priority. We've got to keep people safe. There will, as much as fun as it is to talk about working with chocolate, actually the machinery we're dealing with is quite serious stuff. It'll chop things off, it will push you, it will shove you, and we don't want any of that. So a traditional robot is within a cell. You can't go inside the cell. You have to stop. The machine's got to be powered off before you can go inside and interact with it. But this is where collaborative robots get fun. It's in the name, so they're collaborative. They can work with people. And especially in this project, we were dealing with a hybrid collaborative robot. So the brand was Yakasawa. So they do this hybrid collaborative robot, and it has a few extra sensors to make it a bit smarter. So it knows if a person is within its vicinity. And within the arms of the robot, it actually has sensors. So if it was to touch something, it would know it's there and essentially stop. So it wouldn't just push you. It would go, oh, there's something there. I've got to slow down. And the challenge comes in where it depends on what you're doing with the robot. So what we were doing is so this was our Welsh site. So as a byproduct of the chocolate making process, we end up with cocoa. And that's what Bourneville cocoa is. It's a byproduct. It's what you make hot chocolate with and cakes. We were palletizing them essentially. So they all get packaged up on their nice little cardboard tray. And then it used to be a person would pick up the tray and put it on the pallet. And we replaced them with a cobot. The reason we used a cobot is because the space that we had was very small. And a traditional robot was just not going to fit in that space because along with the cage and the security, it just wasn't going to work. The reason we went for hybrid robots is because the cases are actually quite heavy and the speed which the robot needed to work at would have actually made it unsafe. So what a collaborative robot does is when it senses, and this could be a floor scanner, sometimes it's a safety scanner, if it senses that there's no one in its vicinity, it will work at full speed. So it will be picking up the boxes, putting them on the pallets and running at full speed. If it senses that someone has come within its vicinity, it slows down. And the reason it slows down is, if anyone's listening, engineering principles, heavy loads, robot arms moving with the moment. If you've got a heavy item here and you're moving at a fast speed, it's going to hurt. Whereas if it slows down and it just kind of bumps you, then it's not going to hurt. And that can kind of set its sensors off. So it was a really interesting project to work on because it was something that was so new to all of us. So we were all, as far as the company was concerned, was going through that cyclic learning of this is new, do a bit of research, apply it practically, see if it works, modify it, go back around. Yeah, so it was great. I wanted to put googly eyes on them, but they wouldn't let me.
Because you were calling them cobots then, which I'm assuming a general term. But along with the googly eyes, did anybody, including yourself perhaps, give them nicknames?
I don't actually know because, believe it or not, I've not been to see them since they've been installed because it was during the pandemic. So I did a lot of the work from home. And I was there as a part-time person doing some work while they were recruiting for a full-time project engineer because it was the Welsh site. So even now I've not actually gone to see them, but they might have given them nicknames. I hope they have. I hope they have.
Rachel, earlier you mentioned about you get involved in other things and being an early careers coordinator as well for interns and graduates, for those kind of studying and working in engineering. And I think earlier this year you attended an event, was it Think Tank in Birmingham, to highlight international women's and girls in science. What motivated you to kind of get involved in those kind of things and that side of things and in supporting in, the next generation of engineers?
Yeah, this is a massive passion of mine. And essentially, I'm going to tell a bit of a story if that's okay. We'll go back to when I was doing my GCSEs, or just before I was doing my GCSEs, actually. I remember being in senior school. I remember being in my library and they had careers magazines because we were choosing which GCSEs we were going to take. And I remember seeing a magazine and it was, careers in engineering. And on the front was a picture of an aircraft and a lady with a high vis and hard hat on. And I thought, that's something I could do. I just remember it so clearly, that formative moment of, I'd never considered engineering before. I mean, I love DT, design technology. That was one of my favorite lessons, as well as graphic design. So I went into my A-levels kind of a bit of a split. So I'd chosen subjects which would allow me to do some form of science. So I had physics and maths, but then I also had art because I wasn't sure. I said, do I want to be a graphic designer or do I want to be an engineer? One of my passions is I love painting and drawing, which is surprising for people because they think, well, you're an engineer, you should like maths. Yeah, I do like maths. And I'm going to be totally honest, maths is not my strongest subject. So one of the reasons why I like to get involved with stuff is just to tell people that everything in life, there are going to be certain things which you're going to have to do that are going to take more effort to get to where you want to be. But if it's what you want and it's what you're capable of doing, you shouldn't let that deter you. So I did my A-levels and I'll be honest, didn't get the best grades, but I did get into Aston. I took a year, a gap year. So I went off and did some traveling, did some maturing, came back, started at university, did my 3 years of study and my 1 year in industry. And actually I left my degree with mechanical engineering bachelor's degree with a first class honours. And that's because I'd found what I knew all along my brain would let me do, which is I am an engineer and I do good maths, but when it's applied. I have to be able to picture it. I can't do maths for the sake of maths. It has to be something I can imagine and picture and be like, right, yeah, if you put a force there and then you roll this ball down there and then this will be the outcome, that I can do. And then obviously I did the graduate scheme. And when I left the graduate scheme, I was always involved with the graduates, like interns and graduates coming through the company, because it was something that I was passionate about. And then probably 2 years ago, I thought, I love getting involved with the graduates, but they've already chosen engineering as what they want to do. And that's fulfilling, but not fulfilling enough. I want to go back to that formative year when I was sat in my senior school library and saw that magazine. That's where I need to get people interested. So there's this thing called the dream gap, which is, forget the exact statistics, but kids up to the age of 3 or 4, they'll say whatever they want to be. I want to be a police person. I want to be an engineer. I want to be a dancer. But then after that age, when you get up to about the 6s, there's a drop off of about 50% where the girls stop saying that they want to be engineers, because it's just not something that really is taught to them that they can do. And I'm not saying all girls have to be engineers. I'm just saying that if it's something that they want to do or something that maybe they've never even considered, I just want to be maybe one day that person that just puts that little spark in their head where they think, oh, actually, that's something I've not thought about before. Or maybe it is something they thought about before, but this lady here said that it is something that I could do, even if I'm not the best at maths, even if people tell me that actually I shouldn't be doing that, but it's something that I want to do because I love my job and I love what I do and I wouldn't change it for the world.
What has been speaking of loving your job, what has been your career highlight so far, or top 2 or 3?
Yeah, top 2. I had to cheat and go for 2. So, I mean, technically it's 3. I love talking about my job because I just think it's really cool and I love people get really excited when I talk about it. I always get, when you say, oh, I'm an engineer in Cadbury's, people go, well, what do you do? I go, unfortunately, it's not fairies that make the chocolate, it is machinery. But yeah, I think 2 that really stick out in my head is, so Marvelous Creations. One of my first projects when I started on the graduate scheme was modifying an existing production line to make Marvelous Creations for the first time. It had been a brand that was out in Australia, and I was part of the group that brought it to the UK. And for the first time walking into Tesco's or Sainsbury's and seeing it on the shelf and being like, oh, that was mine. If I hadn't been in that team, that bar wouldn't be there. That was very cool. And on the same line, and again, it sounds a bit funny, but the water treatment effluent plant that I did, the pH rectification plant, that's something that you can actually see on Google Maps now. So I like to take people to Google Maps when they ask what I do, and I'd be like, you see this plant here? I put that there. Before it was just a parking lot, and now there's a treatment. That was my project to put that there. So yeah, those are my 2 that I'd like to talk about.
I love that. Also, earlier you also mentioned that you were involved in the buttons project as well. That's one of my favourite Mondelēz snacks.
Good.
But I'm not too sure if we're allowed to ask, but what's your favourite Mondelēz snack?
Oh, definitely Cadbury whole nut all the way. Love a Cadbury whole nut. Yeah. What's yours, Geoff?
You see, a few years ago, I'd have said fruit and nut without a doubt. But actually, and I don't know if this is just because I'm incredibly impressionable, but I'm either leaning towards buttons or flake.
Oh, flake is very good. Yeah.
Flake's good. That's a good one.
I love a flake.
So, each of our guests, we ask the same 3 quick fire questions to wrap up at the end. So, let's launch off with these. What's the most valuable lesson that you've learned throughout your career to date?
So for me, it is understand what your strengths are. I mentioned before that I'm creative. I like drawing. I like sketching. And that's something that I do day to day in my job. I might not be drawing pictures of flowers, but I'm drawing pictures of machinery. And it's my way of communicating. And it's one of my strengths. And it's what's made me so successful.
And what's next for you, Rachel?
So at the moment, I've just started as a project engineering manager, which is a new thing for me. So there's a lot of less of the doing and the hands-on, which is hard for me because I really like being hands-on, but it's about managing people this time and getting projects done that way. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at for the time being. And then who knows? It's a big company and there's plenty of other production places out there to have a go at.
And if people wanted to connect or find out more, is there anywhere they can find you online?
Yeah, absolutely. Just find me on LinkedIn. So as far as I know, there's only one Rachel Krol out there that's got Cadbury splashed all over their page. So yeah, if you look me up, you'll find me.
Perfect. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today. We've loved chatting to you.
Thank you.
Listeners, as Katrina mentioned earlier, this is the season finale. We're thrilled to announce we will be back with season 2 in November. We've got some really exciting guests lined up and we'll be making 1 or 2 changes as well. In the meantime, we would love it if you would rate the podcast and or leave us a review. It really does help us out. So that's all we've got for you today. We look forward to speaking to you again when we return for season 2.